Oh, it's not running? Okay.
There's still time to celebrate.
All right, welcome to 5 on 20 News. It is Friday, May 12th, coming to you live from the Creative Tucson studios in downtown Tucson. Here's the local news. The Arizona Education Department is finding that students are having an easy time with the Civics test which is now required to pass high school. When calling various schools for information, the department found an almost 100% pass rate for the test, which includes basic questions used to determine citizenship. Governor Doug Ducey instituted the requirement in 2015, which ordered that all high school seniors must pass the test, beginning with the class of 2017. Supporters of the law are pleased with the results, but opponents say that the scores are proof that the test is frivolous and takes up too much time in the classroom. They say that there was already too much time spent preparing for standardized tests, and this adds yet another test to the roster. Joe Thomas of the Arizona Education Association called the test a, quote, dog and pony show that arose from false hysteria and is based on shoddy research. The test is based on the official U.S. naturalization test. But whereas the naturalization test is only 10 questions taken from a list of 100, the high school civics test has students answer all 100 questions. Answering 60% correctly results in a passing score. Lucian Spataro of the Joe Foss Institute, who lobbied for the test, disagrees that they aren't needed. He says that prior to the test, civics weren't emphasized in classrooms. But now, he says, civics will be taught alongside math and English as one of the core subjects in school. Without civics classes, there's a danger that because we might elect a president that doesn't understand the basic functions of government. Wouldn't that be a shame? About 1,667 ballots mailed out for Tuesday's special election were sent to the wrong address. The error by the Tucson City Clerk's office sent the ballots to outdated addresses, which were then returned to the city. All the mistaken ballots all involve people who still live in Tucson but had recently changed their address. New voters and those who recently moved into the city were not affected. The city of Tucson mailed out about 249,000 ballots to vote on whether to impose a half-cent sales tax to fund public safety and road construction. A city official said that they've identified the voters who didn't receive ballots and they will reach out to them individually. Christopher Rhodes, chief deputy recorder in the Pima County office, said that the mistake was made because officials used data from February rather than the updated list from April 21st. Some states, such as Oregon, have moved to more mail-in ballots because of the higher turnout levels. When polled about why citizens don't vote, the top reason was don't want to get up, followed by too much good TV. Third place was blank because people didn't want to answer the poll. Sounds about right. A federal judge is ordering a company with ties to a polygamous sect on the Arizona-Utah border to pay $200,000 in back wages to children who allegedly were forced to pick pecans. Now, the U.S. Department of Labor must fine the kids who participated from 2008 to 2013, far from an easy task. Federal officials are putting up flyers in southern Utah, and they launched a blog this week to announce that people have until April 2018 to submit claims to be paid the $7.25 an hour that they should have been paid for their labor. The U.S. government's child labor case against Paragon contractors began in 2012 based on CNN videos showing dozens of small children at the pecan harvest. Prosecutors were unable to identify the children in the video and have no idea how many children participated or how many will submit claims. Estimates range from hundreds of kids to thousands. They worry that many of the victims might have left or got kicked out of the Church of Latter-day Saints, or if they're still involved, don't know the money is available for them. Paragon plans to appeal the case, in which they were forced to pay a $15,000 retainer and $300 an hour to an independent attorney that will supervise them for 5 years. The church says that the harvest was a church activity and that the children were happy to get a break from school to pick nuts. But the question remains, while this was all going on, where were these kids' 19 parents? Arizona Rep. Raul Grijalva said that the Trumpers' executive order on a presidential commission on election integrity is, quote, straight out of an Orwell novel. Trump signed the order yesterday, which will set up a commission that will investigate voter fraud, which Trump says was rampant during the last election. This is the election that he won, by the way. The order puts Vice President Mike Pence in charge of the commission, and we're sure he's thrilled about that. Kansas Secretary of State Chris Kobach will also be part of the commission. If Kobach's name sounds familiar, that's because he was one of the architects of Arizona's infamous SB 1070 law that allowed law enforcement to check proof of citizenship during routine stops. Democrats say that Trump's crucible against voter fraud is actually a masked attempt to suppress the vote, particularly in communities of color. Even Trump's own attorneys say that in the states of Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, all evidence suggested that the election was not tainted by fraud or mistake. Grijalva said that it was ironic that Pence and Kobach have a history of endorsing and implementing voter suppression tactics in Indiana and Kansas. While governor of Indiana, Pence directed state police to raid the Indiana Voter Registration Project offices 1 week before the state's voter registration deadline. Police confiscated more than 45,000 voter registration forms, mostly belonging to African Americans in the state. Kobach has also been accused of making voting more difficult in Kansas by introducing the Secure and Fair Elections Act that created an additional voting requirement for newly registered voters. His office also provided false deadlines on Spanish-language voting guides in the state. Pence and Kobach are preparing collaborative legislation called the Ultimate Voting Rights Happiness Act that would establish a series of moats that surround polling places in minority neighborhoods. Kobach says that the moats will protect people of color from crocodiles, who are an increasing threat to voters. A Pima County judge is facing charges of ethical violations after being accused of stealing an answer key for a quiz. The non-binding quiz is given to new justices of the peace during an orientation week. Paula Abboud, a former Democratic lawmaker, was elected to Justice of Peace in November after beating out Democratic Chairman Jeff Rogers, a defense attorney. Abboud is officially charged with judicial misconduct, which could lead to her censure, suspension, or removal from office. She allegedly stole the answer key the night before the test when an administrator left the room but watched Abboud through an open door. Judge James Sampines, who saw Abboud, asked her why she took the paper, but she didn't respond. Abboud then said that the act was a prank and she probably wouldn't have read it anyway. But the judge said that her demeanor was not humorous, although Abboud said that Sampines isn't a funny guy, so he wouldn't know a joke if he witnessed it through an open door. The hearing date has not been set because they couldn't find a judge. A 30-year-old Flagstaff man is suffering from hyperthermia after scaling a snowy peak on Mount Eldon in a tank top and shorts. He was rescued after calling for help at around 9 a.m. He explained to authorities that despite heavy snow conditions, quote, he needed to get to the top before the cutoff time to receive a free pizza. That's right. A Coconino County Sheriff's Office statement said that the weather at the time was moderate to heavy snow with approximately 3 to 5 inches of snow on the ground. Luckily, there was a U.S. Forest Service employee stationed in a lookout tower to notice the man's cries for help, and he was able to bring him to safety. But we don't need those guys, right? No statement gave word to as whether he got his pizza, but it is said that his condition is improving. So that's good, at least. We've learned over the past year that police aren't arrested for shooting black men, but now they're being arrested for not shooting black men. A West Virginia police officer is suing the city of Weirton after he was fired from the Weirton Police Department for failure to act in the May 2016 shooting of 23-year-old R.J. Williams. In his termination letter, the department said that Stephen Mader, who was the officer, put fellow officers in danger by not acting on the scene. Joseph Cohen of the ACLU in West Virginia said that Mader was fired for essentially respecting R.J. Williams' constitutional rights. Williams was shot and killed last May after officers arrived at his home early in the morning. He had a history of mental illness, but Mader says that he was the first one on the scene and Williams had his hands behind his back. When Mader told Williams to show his hands, he noticed that he was holding a pistol. Mader drew his weapon and Williams shouted to "just shoot me." However, Mader refused to shoot him and continued to try and get him to put down the gun, like he's supposed to do. At that time, 2 additional cruisers arrived and Williams began waving his gun around, which prompted the officers to shoot him. It was later found that the gun wasn't loaded. The letter states that Mader didn't respond, But he counters that he did make a decision not to shoot Williams based on his body language and his mental state. Mater was a former Marine who served in Afghanistan and says that he had a lot of training being used to assess situations such as this. But the police department says that officers are not trained to deduce the intention of a suspect. Instead, they are trained to needlessly escalate a situation, yell loudly to confuse everyone involved, and accidentally shoot someone, then cover it up by intimidating a rookie officer who hasn't been corrupted yet. Guess he'll learn later. The Vermont legislature passed a bill yesterday to make it the 9th state in the country to legalize marijuana for recreational use. Republican Governor Phil Scott still needs to sign the bill and says that it's not a priority for the state and he hasn't made a decision about signing it. Vermont was the first state to pass a marijuana legislation law through the legislature. Other similar laws were passed by voter referendums. If signed, the bill would remove civil penalties for possessing 1 ounce of marijuana or less and allows adults to keep up to 2 mature plants. It would also create a commission to develop a plan for taxing and regulating the drug. The only surprising part of this news is that Vermont didn't legalize weed years ago. With the state being home to fish, Ben & Jerry's ice cream, and Birkenstocks, it's almost as if they forgot to pass the law because they were high. U.S. Glacier National Park in Montana is reportedly losing its glaciers, with only 26 out of 150 structures remaining. Talk about false advertising. The scientists say that a warming climate makes it inevitable that the U.S. will lose all of its glaciers within decades. The warming temperatures have rapidly reduced the national park's glaciers by as much as 85% since 1966. According to Dr. Daniel Farge, scientist for the U.S. Geological Society, all glaciers will be gone over the next decade. Farge pointed out that Colorado's glaciers started melting before Montana's, and there are larger glaciers in the northwest that will hold on longer but will eventually melt away. The state of Montana is warming twice the rate of the global average and has been going through changes in precipitation that spread all the way to the Rocky Mountains. Rather than glacier-forming snow, the state is receiving more rain, which further erodes the snow. Spring snow melts are occurring at least 2 weeks earlier than they were in the 60s. Glaciers have existed in this part of the country for around 7,000 years, and by studying tree rings in nearby rocks, scientists were able to surmise that there were about 150 glaciers in Montana area in 1850. Farge says that while glaciers come and go with natural fluctuations in weather patterns, this is the first time that they face absolute extinction, which is, ironically, the same issue facing the human race. See you in the afterlife, glaciers. Well, it's a day for milestones, isn't it? The Dakota Access Pipeline experienced its first ever leak before it was even operational. The pipeline spilled about 84 gallons of crude oil at a South Dakota pump station, according to government officials. Protesters set up camp for months at the North Dakota site because the area's indigenous people opposed the pipeline. They feared that the pipeline would leak and taint their water supplies. What an irrational fear, right? President Obama stopped the pipeline soon before his second term ended, but Trump started it back up again with an executive order weeks after becoming president. State officials say that the recent leak, which occurred on April 6th, was contained and quickly cleaned. And based on the fact that the news was just uncovered this week by a local South Dakota newspaper, media access was equally contained. Neither state officials nor the company in charge of the operation made an announcement about the spill. John Hasselman, a lawyer for the Standing Rock tribe, whose lands the pipeline runs through, said that everybody kept saying that the pipeline technology was state-of-the-art. However, Hasselman says that now we know this was false. Officials from Energy Transfer, the company running the pipeline, says that it wasn't oil leaking from the pipes, but rather tears from Standing Rock ancestors, which fortunately isn't a pollutant. In fact, Energy Transfer plans to bottle up the tears and sell them as a cure for acne. Good for them. A video is released purporting to show a Mexican soldier shooting a detained man in the head. Mexico's defense ministry urged federal prosecutors to investigate the video and said that they should, quote, comprehensively clear up whether the soldier shot the unarmed man. In the video, a car riddled with bullet holes slows down, then comes under more gunfire before being surrounded by soldiers. Minutes later, the doors open and the passengers are forced onto the ground. Then, soldiers drag one of the men, who lies on the ground for about 6 minutes before he is shot in the head by one of the soldiers. The events took place during a clash between soldiers and suspected thieves in Palmarito in the central state of Puebla last week. During those battles, 4 soldiers and 6 suspected criminals were killed. This is just one of many complaints of the Mexican military using extrajudicial force on its citizens. In 2014 and 2015, 2 shootouts between the military and suspected gang members killed 60 people. The shootings drew condemnations from human rights groups at the time. 3 soldiers are currently serving prison sentences over those shootings. A report on Tuesday also found Mexico to have the 2nd highest murder rate in the world among countries considered in armed conflicts. But Mexico has questioned the methodology because they say that they are not in a state of armed conflict, mainly because only one side is armed. A detainee at the Guantanamo prison complex will testify on allegations of torture within the facility. Abu Zubaydah, a Saudi-born Palestinian, is waiving his immunity rights in order to speak at a pre-trial hearing over 5 men accused of plotting the 9/11 attacks. Zubaydah's lawyer says that he will speak about his treatment at the hands of the CIA, which includes being waterboarded 83 times at a secret black site following his capture in 2002. If the hearing gets the go-ahead, this will be the first time that Guantanamo inmates spoke publicly about their treatment in court. His lawyer, Mark Denbo, said that, quote, "Unlike the CIA, Zubaydah has nothing to fear from the truth. Despite being incarcerated since 2002, Zubaydah has not officially been accused of any crimes. He's being called on to testify over the treatment of another detainee, Ramzi bin al-Shibh, one of the 5 detainees accused of plotting the 9/11 attacks. Al-Shibh claims that he was subjected to psychological torture at the so-called Camp 7, where agents played beaming sounds and vibrations into his cell in order to disturb his sleep. Zubaydah lost an eye while being held captive by the CIA in Thailand, where he was also subjected to what the CIA called enhanced interrogation, but which is now called torture. This included sleep deprivation and physical abuse so extreme that the CIA sent a worried cable to their bosses warning that he might die and that his body should be cremated if that were the case. Another cable said that if he survived, CIA agents would avoid legal issues by ensuring that he stayed in isolation for the rest of his life. Zubaydah's lawyer accused the CIA of deliberately lying over the detainee's importance as a captive. The CIA claimed that the detainee is the number 3 in charge of Al-Qaeda, a claim that was later completely debunked. After that didn't work, CIA officials said that he was the creator of both AIDS and the Kardashians. After 10 years, a top-secret conspiracy-pumping construction project from CERN's Swiss-French mountain facility comes to an end. A few years of testing and integration are about to begin. CERN's new toy, what's called the LINAC 4 machine, replaces an injector that's nearly 40 years old. Its job is to produce the flow of particles for the Large Hadron Collider, or LHC, the 27-kilometer accelerator that smashes protons together for science. Compared to the 27-kilometer main ring of the LHC, LINAC 4 is tiny at a mere 90 meters long, 12 meters below ground. CERN believes that there is scope for miniaturized versions with many potential uses, including helping to diagnose cancer through scanning and analyzing artwork for museums. CERN Director General Fabiola Giannotti says that once the LINAC 4 is active, it will, quote, considerably increase the potential of the LHC experiments for discovering new physics and measuring the properties of the Higgs particle in more detail, aka opening that portal to another dimension we've been hearing about. I can't wait. All right, that's all for the news. Stick around. I'll be back in a few minutes to hit you up with the week in review of our insane week in politics. See you in a minute. All right, welcome to This Week in Mediocrity, where we present you with all the best in the worst of the media. I'm your host, Joel Foster, and with no one running the FBI, now would be the time to sell all those old football games you've been recording without the written consent of the NFL. I've gone the last 3 weeks without mentioning the president, but I'm gonna have to go back to him today. Despite my best efforts to avoid him, Trump is like a 5-year-old who keeps poking his mom while she's cooking dinner. And the meal for Trump this week was FBI Chief James Comey, who was fired on Wednesday for, well, a few reasons. Maybe. Like anything with Trump, we won't find out until the end of the season. Here's how it began.
President Trump sent this dismissal letter to Comey yesterday, writing, "While I greatly appreciate you informing me on 3 separate occasions that I am not under investigation, I nevertheless concur with the judgment of the Department of Justice that you are not able to effectively lead the Bureau." The Trump administration maintains the decision was based mainly on Comey's handling of the Hillary Clinton email investigation.
Even in a termination letter, Trump makes it about himself. It's amazing. According to the Justice Department, they were upset at the way Comey handled the investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails, which Trump went along with. So he was defending Hillary. He loved her, after all. He was the Boo Radley to her Scout. And he even has the raccoon circles around his eyes. But instead of presents in a tree, he had his friends, the Russians, check up on her because he loved her. That was a nice ending to that story. Anyway, the media got all fired up because of the timing of Comey's firing. It came 1 day after Comey testified about connections between Russia and Trump's campaign staff. Sure, it could have been a coincidence. And it also could have been a coincidence that Jaden Smith got the lead role in After Earth. Either way, you'd figure that since Trump finally gets the chance to fire a public figure, he would do it on TV, right? You're fired. And he did. Kind of.
In other news this morning, President Trump is searching for a new FBI director this morning after abruptly firing James Comey. And now we're learning that Comey found out he was fired while watching TV at an FBI recruiting event.
Let's hope Comey didn't turn on the TV or go on the internet since then, because all of the cable networks and websites are all talking about the firing of James Comey. And it turns out that no one really liked Comey very much on both sides of the political aisle. Even though Democrats questioned the timing of his firing, they all seem to think that he should have been fired for reopening the case against Hillary, which might have cost her the election, at least according to Democrats. So the media put this guy on a spit for 4 days straight. Here's a clip of a recent Comey press conference. Very, very angry people. While Democrats tried to balance their dislike for Comey with the displease over the timing, conservative media jumped on top of the hypocrisy among the Democrats. Sean Hannity has been having the most fun since he took that wrong turn going to the grocery store. Here's Hannity telling it like it is, and by it, I mean completely distracting you from the real issue. Here he goes.
Now, this hypocrisy coming from the Democrats is off the charts, even for their standards. Now, let me remind them all that it wasn't that very long ago, was it, when they were viciously attacking, James Comey. Let's take a look.
We're all disturbed, first of all, by the letter, which really broke precedent, was over the advice of the leaders in the Justice Department. I'm not challenging Mr. Comey's motivation, but I do think it was unwarranted. It was a mistake.
He's got a big burden of proof, so to speak, on him for why he did what seems to be such an appalling act that goes against the tradition of prosecutors at every level of government. It was, when I heard about it, I found it hard to believe that Comey, who I thought had some degree of integrity, would do this.
I hate to admit this, but yeah, Hannity's right in a way. Democrats are trying to have it both ways, in a sense. Kind of like Trump likes to have it both ways, but in a different sense. But Democrats haven't really been defending Comey. Again, they're concerned about the timing, not the abilities of Comey, which they don't seem to be a fan of. But Hannity's definitely right that they can be hypocrites. But the thing is, so can he. Let's take a look.
We've got the NSA program here. We've got the Patriot Act program here. You know, in light of this, how close this was, it's staggering to me that we're even debating the use of these techniques in this country, even at this time. Big Brother is monitoring your every move, whether it be online or on the telephone. Let's talk about why this story, why is this important to you? Number one, this is America, and as law-abiding American citizens, you have a right to privacy.
You have a right to privacy. Except for James Comey, who media outlets followed as he drove on the highway in his motorcade after being fired. If that wasn't bad enough, they followed him to the airport and filmed his flight taking off. I'm surprised CNN didn't stuff Don Lemon in the luggage compartment. Speaking of CNN, host Van Jones once again raised the issue of asking why Trump fired Comey just as he was being investigated for being tangled up with the Russians. Here's Jones giving us his take and proving what a big Tom and Jerry fan he is.
The only winner, the only people who've got to be happy tonight are sitting in the Kremlin. This is the result of letting someone like Putin throw marbles on the stairs, banana peels on the sidewalk for American democracy, and not having the president stand up and say, you know what, I want this to stop.
Banana peels. He's the president of Russia, not Wario. He describes Putin like a cartoon character, like he's dressed in some kind of goofy, oversized costume. But how does Putin really feel? Let's take a look.
Nothing to do with that. President Trump is acting in accordance with his competence and in accordance with his law and constitution. And what about us? Why we? You see, I'm going to play hockey with the hockey fans. And I invite you to do the same.
I'll be here and I'll be watching. Thank you very much.
Мы будем обязательно смотреть. Спасибо.
And I invite you to do the same. It's chilling. What do you think it's like playing hockey with Vladimir Putin? I imagine it's like when Magic Johnson came back and he started bleeding and everyone was avoiding him. He scored like 200 points. That was Putin. I scored 17 goals. And the worst thing about that is that lady has to go to the hockey game now. If she doesn't show up, she's going to get a call in the middle of the night. I didn't see you at the hockey game. Are you feeling okay? Would you like me to send some jasmine tea your way? Okay, speaking of poisonous tea, let's get back to Trump. Remember back in the beginning when Trump said that he fired Comey because he was advised by the Justice Department to do it? Well, on Thursday, he decided to change his story in an interview with ABC News because why the hell not?
He's a showboat. He's a grandstander. The FBI has been in turmoil. You know that. I know that. Everybody knows that. You take a look at the FBI a year ago. It was in virtual turmoil less than a year ago. It hasn't recovered from that.
Monday, you met with the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein.
Right.
Did you ask for a recommendation?
What I did is I was going to fire Comey. My decision. It was not.
You had made the decision before they came in the room.
I was going to fire Comey.
You could hear the palms hitting heads throughout the White House. He just couldn't handle people knowing that he got advice from someone. So Trump went and tossed away the one good alibi he had for firing James Comey, right as the Russian investigation was heating up. Now he's back to square one, which means going back to trolling Rosie O'Donnell, because that's what he did. Yes, on Thursday, Trump retweeted a tweet from Rosie O'Donnell where she called for the firing of James Comey. Trump attached a little love note saying, quote, "It's the one thing we agree with." Ha 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 ha. You're in the middle of like 17 wars right now. What are you doing? You don't have anyone to run the FBI right now. Well, that's not entirely true. James Comey was replaced temporarily by Andrew McCabe, the deputy FBI director. While it seems that everyone hates James Comey, the only people who don't hate him are the ones that worked beside him. McCabe emotionally praised his former boss by saying that, quote, "I hold Director Comey in the absolute highest regard. I have the highest respect for his considerable abilities and his integrity." That must feel good. But everyone still hates Comey, and no, I'm not plugging a new sitcom. So I kind of feel bad for the guy, honestly. So I found a clip, and I think this kind of makes him seem like a good guy and explains his downfall all at the same time. Let's take a look.
Yeah, I was very disappointed in a Wall Street Journal article May 20th in which you seemed to make light of marijuana use by those who like to work for the FBI. You say I have to hire a great workforce to compete with those cyber criminals, and some of those kids want to smoke weed on the way to the interview. You say you've got to loosen up your no-tolerance policy, which is just a 3-year, haven't used marijuana in 3 years. Do you understand that that could be interpreted as one more example of leadership in America dismissing the seriousness of marijuana use, and that could undermine our ability to convince young people not to go down a dangerous path?
Very much, Senator. I am determined not to lose my sense of humor, but unfortunately there I was trying to be both serious and funny. I was asked a question by a guy who said, I have a great candidate for the FBI. His problem is he smoked marijuana within the last 5 years. And I said, I'm not going to discuss a particular case, but apply. And then I waxed philosophic and funny to say, look, one of our challenges that we face is getting a good workforce. At the same time, when young people's attitudes about marijuana and our state's attitudes about marijuana are leading more and more of them to try it. I am absolutely dead set against using marijuana. I don't want young people to use marijuana. It's against the law. We have a 3-year ban on marijuana. I did not say that I'm going to change that ban. I said I have to grapple with the change in my workforce. How do I reconcile my need?
Yeah, well, I think I appreciate that. I think you should understand your words can have ramifications out there.
He should have followed up with, I know from experience. Because can we appreciate how funny it is to have someone like Jeff Sessions to warning him of how words can have negative ramifications? In case you don't see what's funny about that, remember that Sessions once said this.
We're not going to get whipsawed.
And in a heated exchange with Democrat Joseph Biden, Sessions denied calling the National Council of Churches and the NAACP un-American.
My opinion is they have not. They may have taken positions that I consider to be adverse to the security interest of the United States.
Does that make them un-American?
No, sir, it does not.
No, does that make the positions un-American?
No.
Sessions also refuted other key statements he is alleged to have made, including that he thought Ku Klux Klan members were okay until he learned some were marijuana smokers.
This assertion is ludicrous. I detest the Klan.
And he denied that he called a black attorney, Thomas Figures, boy.
I state categorically that I have never called Mr. Figures boy.
You know, if you're in a position where you have to say, I'm not a racist, you're probably a racist. Think about it, people at home. Have you ever been accused of being racist? Probably not, unless you've said something that was really racist. Even Sessions' clear hatred of weed is a bit racist. It's not like he hates OxyContin or Duster. But maybe that was Comey's problem. He was always trying to be serious and funny. Democrat, Republican. Maybe all this time he was joking and we just didn't get it. So that's the thing is, for all his faults, Comey was politically ambiguous for the most part, and that's what he needs to be. FBI director is one of the only positions where you're not supposed to show any signs of being partisan. But because we're so divided, our system demands that you pick a side. Comey didn't pick a side, and for that, he got roasted. And I'm not defending him at all. Comey probably never should have gotten the top FBI spot anyway. He took part in the Bush administration's torture program by signing off on waterboarding, and he covered up the abuses at Abu Ghraib. That alone should have disqualified him. But the odds of finding someone to lead the FBI who has no sketchy past is the same as Zubaydah having a comeback. It's gonna happen. In order to get up that high, you have to follow orders. High up in the FBI, not high like Zubaydah. Moving up in the FBI means being forced to do sketchy stuff. It's just how the FBI rolls. If it wasn't bad, they wouldn't need to keep it a secret. But you can't ignore the timing of the firing and not think that something might be up with Russia. Maybe there isn't. But like I've said before, shouldn't we at least find out? All right, that's all the time I have for today. Remember to think for yourself, don't bother to pick a side, and if you see James Comey in the street, tell him a joke. See you next week, and we will go back to our regularly scheduled program. Have a good weekend.